Today we're continuing to take a look at a scenario where civilization starts over. We're now on episode number 7, and in the last episode we saw a lot of things happen. I guess kind of most notably the Swiss crisis up here. Pretty big. We'll be exploring the end to that, or maybe the end. I don't know if we're exploring the end or the continuation, but we'll be continuing to look at that. But first, I want to say I have changed the map slightly. The terrain layer is more transparent, so you can kind of see the colors more. And I have changed a few of these colors to look a bit better and easily visible, like Venice over here. That's been changed. But the first thing we're actually going to be looking at is the religious organization layer, which I have on right now. And as you can see, there are no stars anymore. The religious organization has been changed, is now under this fisherman hook, which is the religious symbol of the fisherman religion. If I go over to here, you can kind of see it a bit better. Yeah, fisherman's hook. That's basically a hook, and then there's a star on top. Maybe they have a god that like resembles the star or something. I don't know. That's just their symbol. But anyway, 2 countries are actually going to be joining this. The first is pretty obvious. Is actually going to be Turin. As you know, they just broke away from the Swiss, and they are basically all under the red religion, as they're Italian, and basically every Italian instantly converts to this religion. I mean, that's not true. That's not like a stated fact, but it basically is in this scenario. But the second country is a bit more interesting in my opinion, and it is actually going to be Austria, which joins this, as we see that the Austrian king converts himself to the red religion, which is a pretty big, I guess, kind of political, but also kind of spiritual move, as it's kind of like showing the Austrian king wants to align himself more with the Italian states, rather than his Swiss brethren up here. But yeah, right now, the red religion isn't that prominent in Austria, but we do go ahead and see. We also see the religion span elsewhere. I guess kind of a prominent location is over here in Carthage. But we also see that the Greeks are converting a bit more, at least these Greeks, which is kind of to the dismay of Athens, who doesn't want to convert to this red religion and sees it as basically like Phoenician overlords. But we also see that Crete does go ahead and do this as well. And we actually see in this universe that Crete is fully populated by Italians. There are no Greeks over here, although we do actually see that the Greeks will go ahead and populate a lot of these islands, which I think that Venice actually owns these islands. Yeah, but nonetheless, these islands will be populated by Greeks. Meanwhile, over here, we see that the Albanian ethnicity will go ahead and expand itself. Meanwhile, the Serbian ethnicity will also expand, kind of crossing the Danube over here, like so, becoming a pretty big, I guess, kind of blob. But speaking of ethnicities, we're actually going to be looking at a pretty big amount of new ethnicities forming. Over in this region, we see that people have expanded pretty far, and we're actually going to be looking at, I guess, kind of 2, 3 maybe new ethnicities forming up. But they will all be based around this colour here. Now, this colour is originally just the Bohemian ethnicity, but now I'm going to kind of call it the Central European ethnicity, if that makes sense. Obviously, this, branch, if you will, is Bohemian. I guess in terms of the Bohemian ethnicity, we do see that they do go ahead and expand a bit more, like so. However, the main thing is over here, we see the creation of a Slovak ethnicity, like so, which will go ahead and occupy basically the mountainous regions, and a bit more. And we also see the creation of a Hungarian ethnicity, which will be down here, which will go ahead and occupy lands that look something like this. So it's actually a decently small ethnicity. But there we go, I've gone ahead and changed the colours a bit. Those are kind of the main ethnicities. But we actually see that the Hungarian ethnicity, they're actually part of Austria's territories, as these 2 kind of regions here, and also down here are Hungarian. Now I know technically this is not how it works, and I can't just erase people off the map. But I am, so I guess kind of deal with it. We also see the Slovaks begin to go ahead and populate the Transylvanian region down here, becoming a pretty big ethnicity. I think they might actually be the biggest out of the 3. Actually, all 3 are basically similar sizes, except Hungary. Oh, also, over here, we see that the Carthaginian people are Italian. I can't remember if I said this or not, but they are. They call themselves Italians, so yeah. And I guess kind of the final event of the ethnicity layer is that the Swiss are, slowly expanding more and more north. But we actually see over in Austria that the Austrian king goes one step further, and he actually declares that Austrian is a separate ethnicity to Swiss. Obviously, they're like a sub-ethnicity. They're not like a completely new ethnicity, because that wouldn't make any sense. How did I just do that? What the hell? Does something like that look good? Actually, I guess I can make it like slightly darker. But anyway, we see the creation of this Swiss ethnicity. But anyway, we see the creation of this Austrian ethnicity, which is basically, I guess, kind of like Austria's borders. Although some people didn't convert, well, not convert to the ethnicity because that's not how it works. But I guess in this alternate scenario, you kind of like declare which ethnicity you are. So most people in Austria are like, yeah, I'm actually Austrian, not Swiss. Although some people were like, no, I'm Swiss. And then some people in Switzerland were like, actually, I'm Austrian and I want to be a part of Austria. If that makes any sense. And I know I said I was done with the religion layer, but we actually see over here where I forgot that Aquitaine and some kind of surrounding kingdoms do go ahead and convert to this religion. And if we turn on religious organizations, they will absolutely be more than happy to go ahead and join the organization if I can go ahead and pick the right size one. There we go. And I guess I can just kind of throw one down here, maybe if I can go ahead and, select the right size. There we go. That kind of just shows it. I probably should be like putting some of these elsewhere, like maybe here, but I think I'm just going to leave it like that. Now looking at a bit of expansion, we're actually going over to Iberia, where more and more of the Iberian Peninsula has been discovered finally. And we go ahead and see that Valencia will be expanding a crap ton. And they will come out looking something like this, basically doubling their territory, looking very big. And what will they be doing with this new power? Well, they'll be invading this tiny state down here and wiping it out, fully annexing it. And then a few years later, the king of Valencia will be wiping out this state as well, also annexing it. As we see that the Valencian domain has been heavily expanded, and we actually go over to here where we see a few new kingdoms are created. We go ahead and see the creation of a bunch of new countries down here. They all have their capitals. We have Galicia. What else do we have here? Asturias and Leon. And then these 5 smaller duchies. And I might have just said kingdoms. These are all duchies. None of them are technically grand duchies yet, although they might get that by the end of the episode. But anyway, the next event. Yeah, I think we all know what is going to happen up here, as we can go ahead and look at some progress on this war. We see that the Eastern Swiss have launched an invasion into this region down here, and they have killed the local, I guess, kind of council member, senator, I think I called it, and they have completely taken it over. Now, I actually called it the electorate. Also, this color is pretty bad, so I can go ahead and change that for you. There's something like this. We also see that the Swiss actually unprovokingly launch an invasion into Austria, which Austria is pretty annoyed about. And we actually see the Austrian king will decisively defeat the Swiss army over here, killing one of their top, I guess, kind of senators or electors. I keep calling them senators. When I mean senators, I mean electors. And when I say electors, I mean electors. And when I say council members, I mean electors. You definitely understood that. But anyway, we quickly see that this rebellion will actually be revolted. And we see over here that a bunch of these like Alpine people, which I know they're not Alpine, they're Swiss, will rise up. And we quickly see that the Austrian king will begin his own campaign into the Eastern Swiss. Meanwhile, the consul himself of the Eastern Swiss will actually be focusing his campaign up in the north over here. And he will do pretty damn well. Well, the consul of the Western Swiss will be focusing on the pretty core land of Swiss over here. And they will actually do pretty well, almost nearing the capital. Meanwhile, over here, while nobody expected it, we see that Calais has launched an invasion into its former territory, and they've actually managed to slay the local rulers of this land, and they even managed to kill the elector of this region over here, which I honestly forgot. Wallonia, I think it is, if I turn on the states map. Yeah, they killed the elector of Wallonia, and we actually see that the people in Wallonia quickly rise up, and they kind of open their gates to Calais, hoping for better rule under Calais. And Calais is doing incredibly well. And it's not looking too hot for the Western Swiss. But anyway, we'll come to that problem later, as we're going to go ahead and look at some different events going on. And a lot of these events will be some small invasions, starting to, clear up a few of these duchies. And Aquitaine will be launching 3, I guess, kind of campaigns into these 3 duchies, which will go pretty well as they will go ahead and expand their territory. Meanwhile, over here, Provence, or I guess kind of France, which I'm probably going to just call it France, will be launching an invasion into these 2 regions. And will they invade this region? They actually will go ahead and invade this region, leaving only this tiny state here, which will eventually be annexed by Aquitaine. As we see that basically all of the French ethnicity is in one of 2 countries now. So that's a pretty, interesting development. And we can kind of see that Aquitaine and France might be building up a rivalry. And now I keep not wanting to call it Provence, but if I call it France, then it feels a bit weird because, it's just the south of France. So I'll try and call it Provence rather than France. And honestly, I just hate these names, if I'm being honest. We see over in Africa, the people that have landed here, the Sicilians, have explored pretty far. They're exploring this land like mass because people in Sicily want more land. Because it's basically like, hey, you can become basically a local duke over here or whatever. So many people are moving out of Sicily. We also see that the island of Malta has been discovered. We actually see that the island of Malta will be going over to Venice as well as these islands here. And Venice will actually be establishing its own little colony, right around here. But if we look at the ethnicity map, the people down here aren't actually Italian, as they are a brand new ethnicity, which I need to go ahead and find a colour for. These people are actually Berber people, that is the ethnicity here, and they basically exist down here, also across all of these regions, as kind of the Berber people. And they actually exist all the way up into here, like so. Meanwhile, in this region, it will eventually be populated by, I guess, kind of Italians. But the southern regions will be home to Berber people. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure the Berber people exist. I want it to be a bit more interesting. I know they technically don't exist here, but in this alternate alternate timeline, these people are like Berber people, rather than being like Tunisian or, something else. I just thought that'd be, a bit interesting. We do see the people in Malta will actually be the Italian ethnicity, if that, wasn't obvious. But looking at some further exploration, we actually see that a pretty big chunk of Anatolia will go ahead and be explored, like so. And now, if you are from Turkey or hate the Greeks, then look away, because the people settling this land will actually be the Greeks. As we see that a lot of Greeks will actually end up mass moving over here, which will actually lead to a lot of these regions coming under Italian majority. And also in here, the Italians will go ahead and be the majority. As we see that a lot of Greeks are moving over to here, and they will find a bunch of new land, which they can go ahead and populate. And we actually go ahead and see the creation of a brand new country here. I don't know why I said that so energetically. We go ahead and see the creation of a powerful Izmir country. I feel like I just said that, did I not? But anyway, this Izmir country will go ahead and have their capital probably in modern day Izmir, which is like here, I think. So they'll go ahead and the capital here. Also, I might have accidentally just paused my recording, so I hope nothing cut out, otherwise I'm going to cry. But I'm not going to bother re-recording anything, I'm just going to go ahead and hope. But yeah, we go ahead and see that the Venetians are here, and they will go ahead and make a pretty nice home for themselves. Like so, although the people here are Greek, they aren't Italian. The people here are literally Greek. They're just taking over the Greek people. And also, the Greek people are more in Anatolia than they are in Greece, which is something I find pretty funny. But we also go ahead and see that some countries on the border of this unknown land will finally be expanding. We go ahead and see Macedonia expand its borders pretty, bigly. Bigly, that's not a word. Pretty, I don't even know, significantly, whatever. We also see that Athens will go ahead and take over this island. And Athens will also go ahead and take over this island right here. And they will even begin their own, I guess, kind of colony over here. Actually managing to take over, I guess, kind of Hellas Point. That's what this region is called. And we go ahead and see that more exploration will be taking place around here. And we see that Athens continues to expand its land. Now looking something like this. As Anatolia is just kind of getting really weird borders, basically. We'll also see that this pretty rebellious island will be given over to the Spartan administration, because they will be able to, sort out that problem. And also over here, we see that Sicily has heavily expanded its control of this region, now pushing up over to here. We'll also see that Venice will expand its control into this region, which I don't know how, helpful that is, but they will go ahead and be taking over this region. And we see over here that Mr. Old, whatever this is called, Valencia, will also be joining in on this, African colonization game, basically. Early African colonization, everyone. Colonization in the year, like, 100, 200, I don't know what year we're in. Something like that. Between maybe, like, a year 100, basically. We go ahead and see that the Valencians will be carving themselves out a pretty, small colony. And you know what? I guess to, kind of complete this, we actually go ahead and see that over this time, this whole region is discovered, although I will not be placing, kind of kingdoms or duchies down here, at least not for now. But we go in to see that all of this region is explored, and the main reason I'm doing this is to look at the ethnicity layer. We can see that the Valencian people have, expanded pretty nicely down here. Meanwhile, I guess kind of the Galicians have also expanded into this region. However, over here in, I guess, kind of Morocco, we see that this Moroccan ethnicity has basically just completely taken over Morocco. All these people are of the Moroccan ethnicity. And this ethnicity actually spreads quite far down, as even people from down here, are under this Moroccan ethnicity and actually communicate with the rest of the world, which is pretty interesting to see for this time period. We actually also see that it's actually Moroccans that are over in southern Spain, like something like this. And we actually see in the rest of Spain that it's actually just an offshoot of the Moroccan religion. Not Moroccan religion, did I just say religion? Ethnicity. As we see that, I guess, this kind of Portuguese ethnicity, if you will, populates, well, I guess, kind of southern Portugal and I guess kind of central Spain. But yeah, these people are Moroccan. I guess they're technically African. Reconquista, basically. But no, the people living in here are Moroccan. They're not like Iberian. So, the Iberian Peninsula is fully ethnicized. That is not a word, but it is now. And we also see the creation of, I guess, kind of an Algerian ethnicity, which is a sub-ethnicity of Morocco over here, with obviously the Moroccan ethnicity looking something like that. So I guess you can kind of say North African ethnicity, if you will. But this is kind of different, from the Berbers, which if we do go ahead and look at some more of the Sahara being explored, which I know is pretty unrealistic, but I just kind of want it for the ethnicity layer. We can go ahead and see that the Berbers are basically just over here in the Sahara. They're vibing in the Sahara. They do go ahead and look something a bit like this. So you can kind of see they're kind of wrapping around the Algerians. Although that, that's not like on purpose. They're not like, we're going to wrap around the Algerians and be like super cool. But anyway, we can see that the ethnicities look something like this. I guess to compensate for this loss, I'll spread the Algerian ethnicity, a bit further because I don't want them to be so insignificant that there's no point. But I guess kind of the main idea is that they are only really in the coastal regions. You know what, something like that will have to go ahead and work. So we go ahead to see the creation of, I guess, kind of two big main new ethnicities, and then a bunch of sub-ethnicities. I actually think I'm going to go ahead and make this ethnicity light aqua, just to make it stand out a bit more. And we actually see that a lot of the, I guess, kind of the Berber people over here, I don't know why this is still yellow, but we actually see that a lot of these people will actually be converted to the red religion. As we see that the red religion, I don't know how many times I can say it a lot, but they do go ahead and convert basically almost all of the Berber people, or at least, the close by ones, expanding the red religion pretty big in North Africa. And we also see that the red religion begins to spread over here, actually spreading over into Asturias and I guess kind of Leon and Galicia. And also kind of spreading across the Pyrenees over into this kind of like Catalan region. And it also begins to spread up here, although these people don't really like being under the red religion. And I guess it will spread over to, some Hungarians. And if we go ahead and look at the religious organization layer, we can go ahead and see that some people will be joining this. If I can go ahead and pick the right layer. We see over here that all three of these countries will be joining this. And we also see that Catalonia, and well, I guess kind of these countries in general, will be joining this. I don't know how many times I need to say they're joining this. And I think that is it. Now, I have done a lot of talking. So let's go ahead and look at some wars, because I've done a lot. And I have done a lot of, I guess, kind of admin-y stuff. Well, it's not really, but I haven't done, too much map changes. So we can go ahead and look at a few of those. And the main map change we're going to be looking at is the conclusion of the Swiss crisis. As we see up here, the son of the current Western Swiss consul will be going and proving himself as he decisively crushes the Calais army, crushing them in a major battle here on this city, and also one here, completely wiping out their base of support over here. And then we actually see the Calais, the city, will fall after about a year and a half long siege. And we actually see that in this siege, that a lot of people from Calais have actually gone ahead and fled. And we actually see that these people basically get on boats and they flee over to the UK. And we actually see that the Prince of Calais will actually be escaping. And over here, he will actually found his own kingdom. Well, not his own kingdom, hello. And like a new kingdom, basically. Now, I'm not going to call this Calais because Calais is meant to be fallen. If that didn't make sense, Calais is gone. They have been subjugated. But the King of Calais has escaped over here and formed himself a brand new kingdom. which I will go ahead and, make a new name for eventually. I guess maybe you could call it the Dover country, just for kind of fun. But I guess kind of more significantly, we actually see the creation of, I guess, kind of a new sub-ethnicity. Or I guess over here, this region is part of like the pure Burgundian ethnicity. But elsewhere in this region, we see that a lot more people just kind of leave Calais because it's like, why would I want to be a part of a princedom that just got my family slaughtered because they're bloodthirsty? So apart from this tiny region, we actually see that the ethnicity layer will be introducing a new sub-ethnicity, which will actually be English, which, pretty surprisingly, English won't be its own ethnicity. It will actually be a sub-ethnicity of the Burgundian one. So, yeah, English people, we're actually Burgundian. But there we go. New sub-ethnicity. But looking back at the war, because that's, I guess, kind of more important. While this whole thing has been happening for like a year, we actually see that the Eastern Swiss have gone ahead and pushed back against these, defeating the consul, making him flee to this city, which they actually end up encircling pretty big. And we see that the consul begins a siege of this city. Meanwhile, I guess kind of one of the electors does go ahead and do pretty well over here. Meanwhile, over here, Austria is doing incredibly well, as the King of Austria has got a lot of support from Italy, and they're continuing to wreak havoc, especially in the Alpine region, as a lot of these people will actually go ahead and join Austria's side. However, eventually Austria's fun ends when someone manages to take the city, which basically they go through here and kind of slaughter all of the Alpine people in kind of revenge. And we quickly see that Austria's kind of like offensive is, pushed back. And we even see that this slaughtering gets so bad that we actually see a new sub-ethnicity break away from the Swiss. And now if you want to complain, feel free in the comments that I'm creating too many sub-ethnicities and that's not how ethnicity works. But we actually go ahead and see that basically just in the Alps, this new Alpine ethnicity kind of breaks away. These people view themselves as more Alpine and less like the Swiss. They aren't really like the Swiss at all. But they are technically still Swiss, like the Swiss ethnicity. But they kind of are their own new sub-ethnicity over here. Like so. But yeah, back to the war. I keep saying back to the war like 100 times. We see tensions heavily rise when Provence over here goes over to the Western Swiss. And it's like, hey, if you give me this piece of land, I will directly military help you in your war. And the Swiss, guess, kind of consul who is stuck in the city, which actually probably might not be able to receive this information, or maybe probably will somehow, will go ahead and have no choice but to accept this, otherwise he's going to lose everything. So we see the Provence troops quickly roll into this land, managing to secure it for themselves. And they will further launch an invasion into this region, actually managing to decisively defeat the Swiss consul, liberating the city, which we quickly see that this land will be returned to the Swiss, as a huge encirclement takes place up in this region by both Provence and the Western Swiss, leading to all of these troops falling, which is a pretty big blow, and it's such a big blow that the Swiss are going to lose so much land, the Eastern Swiss, and eventually the son of the consul of the Swiss Republic will arrive, and he will absolutely batter these people, and he will push pretty far and deep into this region, completely subjugating the north, doing incredibly well, earning himself a lot of glory up here, as you can kind of see. But over in the east, a lot of troops are called to go ahead and come back to the Swiss, as you see that Austria continues to do well. However, over here, the consul's brother does not get the message that he should be nice to Austria, and he will actually decisively kill the Austrian, I guess, kind of leader, king in this battle, which will force a lot of these regions to actually resubmit over to the Swiss, like so. He will even go as far as crossing over into the Alps, leaving only this region under Austrian control. And I guess kind of the consul's son will be famed as like a hero because he is just defeating the Eastern Swiss. He's defeating the Austrians. He's defeating Calais. He's basically beat everyone. And he will be the one to take Liechtenstein. And eventually we see that up here from the northeast, the consul's brother comes. Meanwhile, over here from the west, we see the consul himself comes. And then from the south, the French king does go ahead and come. I keep repeating the same word. But anyway, eventually we see that all of these forces will launch a three-way siege on the capital city, and they will eventually take it. And eventually this Alpine region will, after, a few more months of fighting, submit, and we can go ahead and look at a little peace treaty. And this peace treaty is pretty damn simple. Provence gets this region actually basically hurting the coastal axis of the Swiss. They no longer have access down here, but Provence annexes that region. Meanwhile, over here, we see that Austria They're now independent, and the Western Swiss kind of have to give them their freedom and be like, hey, you're kind of free. We'll sign a truce, but we might break that truce later. So watch out for that. And they will go ahead and take like 3 provinces down here, making their borders look a bit nicer, I'd say. And I guess kind of the main thing is that the Swiss are now back together. Calais has also gone ahead and been defeated, and they now have this very influential city over here. Also, I put that on the wrong layer. And it is still a pretty large city in the New Republic, and it's basically their basis of all operations in the very far west, in like the British Channel and stuff. But yeah, we do go ahead and see this new consul, which is now the consul of the Western Swiss. Well, this is the Western Swiss, so the Western Swiss consul is now the new consul of just the Swiss Republic, but he will be moving his capital back to Switzerland, and he will basically be limiting the power. He'll be removing the high elector seat, and he'll basically saying any draws are decided by the consul, and the consul can override and veto any law he wants. So he basically just becomes kind of a dictator, and this consul will live until he dies, basically. He will be consul for life. He's given the consul for life position, and he will happily take that. But yeah, that is the conclusion to the Swiss crisis. And like I said, we see up here, the brand new country is created, which is actually the Dover country, which is actually the Calais country, so it's not brand new. But the Dover country will go ahead and put its capital here, kind of like, no, I see you across the shore. And you can kind of like look across the shore and be like, I'm sorry, I failed you. But we're here now, so yeah, suck it. We clearly see that this Calais country will expand its territory. However, eventually it doesn't really have the power to do that, as people are losing support. They're like, excuse me, Calais King, can you stop? Because, or I guess kind of Dover King now. We literally left because of all your killing, so why are you continuing to kill? And he'll be like, my bad, I guess. And as one of the last events, we go in and see the creation of this kind of like London Duchy over here, which if you couldn't guess, they'll be putting this they'll be putting their capital right here, which I know technically isn't where London is. London is more like here, but this is close enough. I don't really know where to put it on the map. I guess we'll go ahead and put it like that, so it's technically on the Thames, but it's kind of not in the Thames. But yeah, I don't want this video to get too long, so I think I'm going to do one last event and then power rankings. As you know, we got time. We got many episodes to go ahead and do stuff. Yeah, there's only one more event I have noted on here. And it's actually a very big event in terms of power dynamics. As we go ahead and see, as we go ahead and see over here that currently these two are in a personal union, but also something I haven't shown, what the hell's going on, is that also down here that the Venetian king is now basically firmly... What on earth is going on? But we also see down here, the Venetian king is now in a royal union with basically all of these, I guess, kind of tiny southern Italian duchies down here. And we see that the Venetian king has died. After a long life, he's like 70 or something. That's pretty big if you ask me. Pretty big, pretty old if you ask me for the time. I don't know how long people lived. Maybe 60's too high. But anyway, king old, he's died. And we see that a new king has taken place. And we actually see that this new king is going to do something. And he's basically just going to be like, I'm done being a king of multiple countries. And he's basically just going to unite all of the countries that Venice has a royal union with. And he's going to go ahead and proclaim the creation of a brand new state known as the Venetian Union, which will contain Milan, as well as all of these southern Italian states down here, creating this very powerful and scary Italian state. And we actually see something pretty interesting in terms of capitals, as we actually see that the Venetian Union will have 3 capitals. They'll have one over in Venice, one in Milan, and one down here in the south to kind of signal, these are the 3 parts of the Venetian Union. I guess technically Greece is kind of a part, but they're not, populated by Italians. So it's kind of like, we kind of just ignore them because we're racist. It's the year like 200 or whatever, 100, probably 100 I'm going to go with. But anyway, Venetian Union is now a thing. A very powerful state. Probably one of the strongest countries in the world. Probably with the strongest Italian state. And they're now a pretty, big, country. I don't know why I keep saying Wait, hold on. I low-key lied. We're looking at one more event before power rankings. And that is up here. The brother of the now consul for life will be go ahead and, taking his revenge because he's not had, much fun. What is going on here? Okay, there we go. He's basically going to be going up to these, I guess, kind of Dutch people, and he's going to be massacring a bunch of them. And after this, he's going to go ahead and expand the Swiss Republic to go ahead and incorporate all of this land, like so, and also, some of these islands. And eventually, the Swiss will come out looking something a bit like this. And yeah, let's finally look at some power rankings, and let me end this episode off, because I'm sure this episode is more than long enough. And honestly, I'm kind of happy with how this episode turned out. At least from my point of view, I've added a lot to the map, at least in terms of ethnicity, religion, religious organization, and all that. There wasn't necessarily much political change, but there kind of was, to be honest. So I hope that you enjoyed, because I quite enjoyed this episode. But yeah, power rankings. The number one country is actually Venice. I know that might be a shock to, some people. The number one country. What the hell? But yeah, number one country. They have now a pretty powerful empire. Let me actually go ahead and show this, because it's going to be quite hard to view it without this. But this is the Venetian, I guess, kind of empire, or not. Well, it's the Venetian Union. So I guess I'm just going to call them Venice, but they are, different. But Venice looks something like this. Pretty damn powerful. And they basically just dominate the trade. So that's why they're number one. Number two is going to be Provence. Now, maybe the Swiss would be number two. The Swiss are currently number three, but they did just get out of a brutal war. So maybe when they rebuild, they might become number one again, or at least number two. But, they're number three. Number four is going to be Valencia over here. They have expanded to form a pretty powerful country. Number five is going to be Florence. Number six is going to be Sicily over here. They have grown pretty well. 7 is going to be Croatia. They haven't gotten weaker, it's just everyone's gotten stronger. 8 is going to go ahead and be Austria. If I can go ahead and colour it in, mate. 9 is going to go ahead and be Aquitaine over here. And rounding off the top 10 is actually going to be Albania, who actually has a pretty powerful leader, which has basically kind of revolutionized the state. Not revolutionized, reformed the state to make it a pretty, prosperous state for how small it is. So yeah, that is the power ranking. Notable contenders, these Iberian kingdoms, although they're quite new. Brittany could be up there, pretty strong. Genoa, maybe. Serbia. Maybe this is Izmir country. Actually, Trieste is kind of irrelevant. So. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this video. And I hope this video was both long enough, not too long, and not too boring. Let me know what you thought in the comments. And I'll see you in the next one.